morning. I'm Stephanie with Horizon Law. Today I'm here with David Heckenlively, and we are here to talk about some issues pertaining to people with special needs and therapeutic care. So I'm going to open it up for you to share just a little bit about your background. So what is it that you do specifically, David?
People call me a therapeutic and educational consultant, which can mean a few different things. My degree is as a marriage and family therapist. So in that job, what I do is help people figure out what's going on with their child, do an assessment, and gather information from other professionals. And then I help people figure out a treatment pathway that fits their own kids' needs, either locally or away from home. So that's in general, what it is, yeah.
So I came to know you through a personal situation with my nephew, who is currently at a wilderness camp, which we're going to get into in a few minutes to talk about what that is. But basically, you are facilitating a support group for parents of at-risk youth. Correct me if I say anything wrong. So basically, you kind of helped facilitate this with my nephew to get him off to a wilderness camp because he was having some aggressive behaviors. He was struggling with school and a lot of things. So can you share just a little bit about what that support group is and what that looks like?
Yeah, the support group is something I started about 2003, and it's a weekly group. It's for the families that have recruited me. It's not like an open public group. And it's really simple. It's a safe place for the parents to come to jump on board with this overwhelming process of learning about what's out there. When do you send your kid, if you do at all? What can you do at home to maybe prevent them from needing to go away? If your kid is in a program, there's a lot that goes with how do you participate in the best way to maximize sort of the best outcome. And it puts a lot of pressure on parents to do this work because a lot of families or parents don't really, they're not interested in psychology, or they haven't had a lot of background in it, or they've had a ton of background in it. And so it's a great place to just take off your mask, I guess you could say, that you have to put on in the outside world and just drop into a space that's safe for yourself to talk about what's going on, how did you get here, how are you going to take advantage of this treatment that you're doing right now. And you're probably going through PTSD, possibly, a lot of trauma you're going through, grief and loss is just overwhelming. And I've been through some of that personally too. So I just wanted a place that's safe, that's professional, and that parents could, figure out where they are. And if they're in the wilderness or whatever, how do you make the most of it? How do you, and you learn a lot, I think, in the group that I run from other parents. They're the real wise ones because they've been through it, they might have made mistakes. So they're kind of mentoring the newer people who come in. So I just really feel good about it. It keeps me kind of uplifted, rather than weighted down. I have a brother who was at risk, and my parents did not have a support group, or they didn't choose to go, whatever. And so I think when people aren't getting help like that, I think the whole family suffers. It's not just the kid at risk. It's the sibling at home who's trying to do things really well to be the good kid. And the kid might, I feel for all of it. Yeah.
So backing up a little bit, we just discussed that you do a support group for parents for kids at risk. How would you define, or maybe can you give some examples of what at risk really means for the types of youth that are coming, through your program? Yeah,
there's a real spectrum of at-risk issues, ranging from, kids who are possibly depressed, acting in sort of an internal process. Maybe they're not getting out of bed. Maybe they're, struggling in school, making friends. Sometimes tied in with that is a screen addiction or screen obsession. It could even be, fantasy books. It can be a lot of things. So there's kids who are suffering from, I think, depression or poor sense of self, and they're at home. Then there's a wide spectrum all the way, you know, to the other end, which could be a kid acting out, trying to take control of the family, which a kid who's acting in could, in a sense, be taking control of the family too. But acting out, aggressive, using substances, not coming home at night. So there's a whole spectrum of like mental issues, psychological, emotional, behavioral. It's kind of the whole gamut. Sometimes there's even, you know, physical challenges that are going on at the same time. So it's impossible to define the at-risk kid in a way, because it's pretty much any kid who's not thriving, really struggling, the family is really struggling. An intervention at least needs to be talked about. Like, what does an intervention mean for a kid whose trajectory is scary or worrisome? Like, if you keep thinking ahead 6 months or a year and the same behavior continues, you kind of think, wow, when they get to 18, this isn't gonna, you know. So when people are in that kind of mix, I think is when they start talking to local professionals a lot, of course, therapists and stuff. And then when it seems like nothing's really changing much, that's a lot of times when they might be referred to me.
Okay.
You know?
What, is there any particular age group for kids that are going through this? I know with my nephew, it started when he was 6 years old, which was there was no help at that time. It was really stressful and scary. Is there any age range that is not?
No, I mean, really, it's harder in some ways if a kid's younger, 6 or 8. There are definitely resources related to those kids. So really, from, you know, any age all the way up to, I mean, I've had people I've worked with a young adult is like 29 and 30. But even beyond that, not so much my practice, there are people who, you know, intervene and do things for people, like, say, over 30. So I go from, you know, childhood to maybe age 30.
Okay,
Yeah.
wow. So your focus is more on supporting the parents and the families that are dealing with the at-risk person and helping them navigate through all of their stress, and right? Can you elaborate just a little bit more on what that would look like in the support group?
In the support group itself, they'll focus on, you know, where they are in their process, sort of like where their kid is with my guidance, because I've been sort of guiding them, navigating them down the track of how do you help your teen or young adult, you know, where to go. And I'm meeting the kid or young adult here and there too, to get to know them. So along with that, you know, the parent group is really for them to just catch up the whole group as to where they are in their process. Like, you know, where is their kid? How is it going? A lot of the parents in the group have a kid in the program at that point. So they're letting everyone know, like, what's new, what's problematic. There's a lot of twists and turns when you're in a residential school or a wilderness program. It's not very linear. There's a lot of things that come up. There can be setbacks. Everyone's out of their comfort zone when your kid goes to treatment, you know, so parents have a lot to talk about. So I have to almost contain people to a certain amount of time in the meeting, because everyone needs, but my priority is everyone does talk, because I think there's a lot of shame. Maybe everyone, I'd say to some degree, feels a little bit of, or a lot of shame about what's happening, who they can talk to. Maybe they can't even talk to people in their own life. Their own family doesn't want to talk about it, right? And, or some people have been shaming you, like, you messed up as a parent. So they're coming there to unpack.
Yeah. And that's so needed for families. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so great that you have that. So moving into this conversation of what is a wilderness camp, because we were talking about that. So wilderness camp is just one option. What's kind of the range of where, you know, where kids would go if they can't be at home because it's just not safe anymore?
Yeah, there's basically, breaking it down, there's short-term primary care is what we might call it, and then there's longer-term extended care. That's a general way of talking about it. Short-term primary care are things that you might go to, like if a kid has to go to a psychiatric hospital, that sometimes happens. Those are very short, like 3 days. You know, those are not meant to be treatment. from that situation, or even situations at home where a kid's at risk and, you know, they don't need a psych hospital, but there needs to be an intervention. Kids typically go from the hospital or home to what we call subacute hospitalization, which is like 30, 60 days, or they go to like a residential rehab, which is 30, 60 days. That's there's one called Muir Wood, which I think is really good. There's not many, and they need to be, you know, talked about. They're in Petaluma. That's for substance abuse and just boys. The alternative to those is wilderness therapy. Wilderness therapy is a short-term primary care. It's 60 to 90 days, never less than 60. It's mostly private pay, though insurance is starting to pick up more of the tab. So those are the different options. And then outside of that or beyond that are continuing the care that a kid really might need, because those aren't often enough. People don't realize, you know, they're primary, they get you, they're sort of like the ER, and you want to get out of the ER and they want to get you to a better place, but a lot of times you've got to go to physical therapy, you've got to do a bunch of things in care, and so does the family. So extended care, longer term care, those are made up of boarding schools, residential treatment centers, and we call them emotional growth boarding schools. Boarding schools that actually just have a little bit of support but no therapy. So there's like a spectrum of all these different places. And my job is, part of my job that's not on the parent side but on the other side, is evaluating them, visiting them, traveling around the country, even outside the country, and working just for the parents though. I don't get anything from them to have a critical eye and, you know, figure out who are they, where they come from, what kind of kid do they serve, are they all about money, are they, you know, whatever, you know, completely, you know, and then, yeah, so there's a full range, and yeah, part of the job of the primary care, like wilderness is really good example of like getting a really intensive, deeper experience, because it's not traditional therapy, you're outside, it's very safe. Your limits get pushed, but you tend to grow a lot. You emotionally grow faster than you can anywhere else, just the way they structure it. It really helps everyone, me and the team and the parents, figure out like what is the best second step. Is it coming home? Is it an extended residential treatment center, which is kind of a higher level of schooling and therapy, because we learned from wilderness that the kid needs more deep therapy. You know, they can't just go right back to school. They've got to have something that's more about who they are and their sense of self and their behavior, and those things are not going to change very fast. They start to change in wilderness a little bit, right? Or from wilderness we can figure out maybe the kid can go to an academic school that has some therapy, but they've turned quite a corner in wilderness and their issues weren't super deep-seated, and they have the kid's motivated now to own their problems. This happens in wilderness sometimes, and it's not a judgment on the kid, whether they're good or bad. It's just the kid themselves, like that's just who they are. And so sometimes a kid, I'll guide the parents to like an emotional growth or an academic boarding school that has some therapy, but it has a little bit more of an open structure. You can go into town, but they're going to still have a lot of eyes on you. You're not going to get off the rails like you were at home. You're not going to have a cell phone, right? They might give you a cell phone at the very end of being there a year and a half, and you kind of earned it. But at that point, you've grown up a lot. And so there's just a wide and crazy range of things out there, which I learned about, you know, quite a few years ago, but it was wild to even learn it. There's places in Guam, and there's Costa Rica. I mean, it's, yeah, you wouldn't know that.
There's so many layers to this. That's awesome. You know, I feel like so many families feel lost and confused and scared and just no idea what to do. Yeah. And I feel like this is such a great resource here for, especially here in the East Bay area, for families that are dealing with any kind of issues in this way. So when would it be the right time for somebody to reach out to you?
I guess ideally it would be if they know they have an at-risk kid, or enough people in their lives are talking to them, their own other children, their own, these are the parents' children, the parents' parents, the community is worried. And they have tried, if they've already tried therapy, that's great, but maybe they haven't even tried therapy, but just talk to people about like what's going on in a private, sort of confidential way. Because I get a lot of families where I don't recommend going to Wilderness or any kind of a residential thing. I actually suggest local things. There's a lot of local resources. I think part of my drive is to kind of beef up the therapeutic community or services locally, because that's really kind of weak at times. And that's partly why a lot of kids need to go, is because we don't have a lot of things here.
Right.
But there are really specialized people here who do like EMDR, which is for like trauma, and there are people who work just with kids. So I like people to just reach out, you know, and talk. I think the time is just when you think there's a problem, reach out and call and try to find out like, what do you do? I got your name, and I'm a kind of clearinghouse or a central spot to try to get people to the right place. So I think, yeah, I guess if you have a lot of things that are adding up as problems, usually it's not just one thing. Like if a kid's smoking pot but doing well in school, X, Y, and Z is okay. I mean, that's not really who calls.
Right.
It's the people with a lot of things.
Yeah. So one of the other things I wanted to highlight about these support groups is that there's a lot of resources just among the families that are participating in the group. So from my personal experience with my nephew, I understand I wasn't the one in there, but from what I've heard, the other parents sometimes have been further along in this process of, especially with the wilderness camp. I know this is like the most extreme kind of a situation that my nephew's in, where he is in a wilderness school, and that whole process was very scary and traumatic for the parent, and so not having any idea where to start and how to go about each step, and then also funding it. And you had mentioned that there is some insurances are covering it, depending on their IEP and, you know, the schooling system. There are other ways of maybe funding it, and you know, that's something that can be discussed among other families and attorneys and things like that. We, Horizon Law, we do legal planning for special needs as far as if you want to leave money. If something happens to you as a parent, you want to leave money to your child, but maybe you don't trust that they can manage it well. So there's ways that we can protect those assets in what we call a special needs trust, and that money is protected for them, but they don't have direct access to it, so someone else would act as trustee to manage that money for them, and you would decide who that is. But it also protects the money for any public benefits, if there's any kind of disability pay going towards helping, or just whatever those resources are, so they don't become overqualified and not we don't want to take away those benefits that they could have. So there's just so many resources out there. I just wanted to highlight that, I mean, we're just getting on the tip of the iceberg. These support groups can be really great for figuring out what all those resources are.
Yeah, and I don't have all the answers. I don't know all the resources. A lot of them come up from the parents, not necessarily about the programs, but all these other aspects. They're essential to have a good referral to. Some families have kids who are going to receive money, or they're in a situation that's just not great because they can't be responsible quite yet, and they need to go someplace to like talk it over and what are the options, and different ways to look at it. They really do need to have this part of the puzzle. It's definitely like a painting, and there's different areas that maybe you have to stay on sort of figured out, but at some point, if you can talk to people like what you guys do and cover all your bases, talking to the school district and the IEP process, and who do you talk to? How do you talk to the school district?
Yes.
Basically, a lot of the parents in my group are kind of built-in coaches for each other. They're good at it, so they're better than I am at speaking to many different topics. So that's definitely where I think more support groups are also needed, in a sense, for all of us, all the things we do, like what you guys do too.
Well, I feel like this has covered a lot of information. Do you have anything else that you want to touch on before we close it up?
No, I don't think so. I really appreciate you guys having me come in.
Oh,
I
yeah.
really am glad to meet you guys and look forward to more conversations.
Thanks. Yeah, I can't even thank you enough for your wisdom, because this is something new to us as well, and we want to really help other families that are dealing with these
Mhm.
types of issues as well, because it is really scary, stressful time.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for watching. We hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you.